Hello, this is Sanchal Anthony from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, AGIET, Mangalore. So today we will be discussing regarding what you mean by system protection. So in system protection we will be going through what are the goals of protection, what are the principles of protection, the domain of protection, and the implementation of protection using access matrix, and the implementation of the access matrix, and what is the revocation of access rights. Next we'll move on to the first topic called as goals of protection. Why do we require something called as protection? As computer systems have been more sophisticated and pervasive in their application, the need to protect their integrity has also grown. Protection was originally conceived as an adjunct to multi-programming operating systems so that untrustworthy users might safely share a common logical namespace such as a directory of files, or share a common physical namespace such as memory. Most protection concepts have evolved to increase the reliability of any complex system that make use of shared resources. So operating system consists of collections of objects which can be either hardware or software. We need to provide protection for several reasons. The most obvious is the need to prevent mischievous, intentional violation of access restriction by a user. So protection can improve reliability by detecting latent errors at the interfaces between component subsystems. Early detection of interface errors can often prevent contamination of a healthy subsystem by a malfunctioning subsystem. The role of protection in a computer system is to provide a mechanism for the enforcement of the policies governing resource use. These policies can be established in a variety of ways. The policies for resources can or may vary by application, and they may change over time. Note that mechanisms are distinct from policies. So mechanisms are nothing but they determine how something will be done, and policies will decide what will be done on the mechanism. So each object has a unique name and can be accessed through a well-defined set of operations. So the protection problem ensures that each object is accessed correctly and only by those persons that are allowed to do so. Next we'll move on to the principles of protection. What are the guiding principles for protection? The best and the simplest way for protection is the principle of least privilege. So what happens in the principles of protection is a key time-tested guiding principle for protection is the principle of least privilege. So as I told you, it dictates the programs, users, and every event systems to be given just enough privilege to perform their task. An operating system following the principles of least privilege implements its features, programs, system calls, and data structures so that failures or compromise of a component does the minimum damage and allows the minimum damage to be done. So managing users with the principle of least privilege entails creating a separate account for each user with just the privilege that the user needs. An operator who needs to mount tapes and backup files or system has access to just those commands and files needed to accomplish the job. This is one of a simple example. Next we'll move on to what do you mean by a domain of protection. So here in domain of protection we see something called as a domain structure. So before moving on to what is a domain structure, how to deal with the concept of domain structure, we'll just go with the basics of what do you mean by domain of protection. A computer system is a collection of processes and objects. So by objects we mean both hardware object and software object. So hardware objects can be such as CPU, the memory segments, the printers, disks and tape drives, and software objects can be such as files, programs and semaphores. So each object has a unique name and differentiates it from all other objects in the system, and each can be accessed only through well-defined and meaningful operations. Objects are essentially abstract data types. A process should be allowed to access only those resources for which it has authorization. This is one of the important criteria for protection. Furthermore, at any time a process should be able to access only those resources that it currently requires to complete its task. So this is regarding the domain of protection. Now next we'll move on to what we mean by a domain structure. So now, in order to facilitate this scheme of domain of principle, a process operates within a protection domain which specifies the resources that the protection may access. So each domain defines a set of objects and the type of operation that may be invoked by each object. Now here, as I told you, object can be anything, and at the same time the rights can be either a read write or a write set what you are specifying. The ability to execute an operation on an object is an access right. So a domain is a collection of access rights, each of which is an ordered pair which contains the object name and right set. So that is what is shown here. Access right is nothing but it is collection of each of the ordered pair of object name and right set. For example, if domain D has an access right for file F and the right set is read and write operation, then the process executing in domain D can both read and write file F. It cannot, however, perform any other operation on the object other than read and write. Domains do not need to be disjoint. They may share access rights. For example, as shown in the figure, we have three domains, D1, D2 and D3. Here we have specified it as O1, O2 and O3 are nothing but the objects, okay? And D1, D2, D3 are the domains. The access right O4, print is shared by domain D2 and D3, implying that a process executing in either of these two domains can print object O4. Note that the process must be executing in domain D1 to read and write object O1, while only process in the domain D3 may execute the object O1. So the association between a process and a domain may be either static, if the set of resources available to the process is fixed throughout the process lifetime, or dynamic if it is not in a fixed pattern. So establishing a dynamic protection domain is more complicated than establishing a static protection domain. A domain can be realized in variety of ways. So before moving on to how to implement the concept of access matrix and what is an access matrix, you should also know something called as domain switching. So if the association is a dynamic, a mechanism is available to allow domain switching, enabling the process to switch from one domain to another domain. Okay, a domain can be realized in variety of ways. Either each user may be a domain. In such case, a set of objects can be accessed depends on the identity of the user. Each process may be a domain. In such case, or in this case, the set of objects that can be accessed depends upon the identity of the process, and each procedure may be a domain. In this case, the set of objects that can be accessed corresponds to the local variables defined within the procedure. So next we will move on to what you mean by a access matrix. So our model of protection can be viewed abstractly as a matrix called as an access matrix. So in access matrix we have rows and columns, where the rows of the access matrix represent the domains and the column represents the objects. Each entry in the matrix consists of a set of access rights. Because the column defines objects explicitly, we can omit the object name from the access right. Okay. The entry access I, j defines the set of operations that a process executing in domain di can invoke in object oj. To illustrate this concept, we consider an access matrix as shown in the figure. So this is a simple figure which specifies there are 4 domains D1, D2 and D3, as we specified earlier that the rows of the access matrix represents the domain and the column represents the object. So here we have got 4 objects D1, 4 domains D1, D2 and D3 and D4, and 4 objects F1, F2, F3 and 1 laser printer. A process executing in domain D1 can read files F1 and F3. A process executing in domain D4 has the same privilege of one executing in the domain D1, but in addition it can also write on file F1 and F3. Note that the laser printer can be accessed only by a process executing in the domain D2. The access matrix scheme provides us with the mechanism for specifying a variety of policies. The mechanism consists of implementing the access matrix and ensuring that the semantic properties we have outlined indeed hold. The access matrix can implement policy decision concerning protection. The policy decision involves which rights should be included in the I, j entry. The process now, for example, we'll just go through basics of use of access matrix. If a process in domain di tries to do operation on object oj, then the operation must be in the access matrix. So if the given operations are not associated with the domain, the concerned domain can't execute or can't use the object rights. Can be expanded to the dynamic protection. So operations to add and delete access rights has been specified in the later topic. Special access rights such as owner, copy and operation, control and transfer and switch from domain di to dj, and control di can modify dj access rights. So all this we will look into the later topic. The use of access matrix. So access matrix design separates mechanism from policy. So what are the mechanism here? The operating system provides an access matrix plus the rules. If it ensures that the matrix is only manipulated by authorized agents and that rules are strictly enforced. Policy. User dictates the policy and it also specifies who can access what object in what mode. Implementation of access matrix. So when you deal with the concept of implementation of access matrix, each column is equal to the access control list of one object. Okay, so it defines who can perform what operation. Now for example, we say that domain 1 can do the operation of read and write, domain 2 can do read operation, and domain 3 can do read operation. Each row has got something called as a capability list. like a key. For each domain, what operations allowed on what object? That means object 1 can have read operation, object 4 can have read, write and execute operation, and object 5 can have read, write, delete and copy operation. Now we'll just look into the figure. So now in this figure it shows that the processor should be able to switch from one domain to another domain. So as I told you, this is one of the capability that the switch operation can be done. We can execute the switch operation on an object domain. Okay. Now process should be able to switch from one domain to another domain. Domain switching from domain DI to domain DJ is allowed if and only if the access write switch belongs to the access I, J. Now just look into the figure. A process executing in domain D2, okay, can switch to domain D3 or to domain D4. The process that is executing in domain D2 can switch to domain D3 or D4. In the same way, a process in domain D4 can switch to D1, and one in domain D1 can switch to D2. So for that we just need to write the command switch, or we just need to write the operation switch, the corresponding domain to which domain needs to switch. Okay. So in this diagram it shows that domain D1 can do operation read on object F1 and F3 and also can switch to domain D2. At the same time, domain D2 can use the printer option and can switch between or switch to domain D3 and D4. Okay. So this is something related to the access matrix simple operation. Now moving on to next one. The ability to copy and access write from one domain of the access matrix to another is denoted by a asterisk symbol. Okay, it is appended to the access write. The copy write allows the copying of the access write only within the column for which the access is defined. So this diagram shows a process executing in domain D2 can copy the read operation into any entry associated with the file F2. Okay. Hence the access matrix of the diagram, which is specified as A, can be modified to the access matrix shown in the below diagram. So now this scheme has two variants. The first one is a write is copied, okay, not WRITE, a write, RIGHT is copied from access I, J to access K, J. It is then removed from access I, J. This action is a transfer of write rather than a copy. Okay. Next, a propagation of write, copy write may be limited. That is, when the write R star is copied from access I, J to access K, J, then the write R is created. A process executing in domain DK can further copy the write R. So this is regarding the copy write. So if you want to implement the concept of the write access, then we need to append the operation with the asterisk symbol. So far we have gone through the read operation, the write operation, the basic execute operation, and the printer between the domain and the object. Also we have seen the concept of switch between the two domains and also the copy, access, write. So here we will move on to something called as the owner write. Okay. A system may select only one of these three copyrights, or it may provide all the three by identifying them separate as either copy, transfer or limited copy. As I told you, copy is the main right and transfer and limited copy are the two various things. Next, a system may select only one of these three copy rights. Okay. We also need a mechanism to allow addition of new rights and removal of some rights. So here, in order to have an addition of new rights and to delete or remove some of the rights, we require a specific mechanism. So for that we require something called as an owner control or owner right. The owner right control this operation. For example, if access I comma j includes the owner right. Now for example, we can see here D2 is having an owner right. We'll come back to that. Okay. Now for example, we'll just see the basic part. If access I comma j includes the owner right, then process executing in domain di can add and remove any right in any entry of the column j. Okay. So for example, just look into the figure. Domain d1 is the owner of f1. Okay, and thus can add and delete any valid right in the column f1. Similarly, domain d2 is the owner of f2 and f3. So, and thus can add and remove any valid right within these two columns. Thus, the access matrix can be modified. Now, for example, okay, as shown in the figure A, is nothing but the owner rights that has been given to domain d1, d2 and d3 is not been given with any owner rights, but in figure B it shows that what all updation has been done. Now for example, in the first figure, d2 is the owner of f1, sorry, d1 is the owner of f1. So d1 has removed the execute option from d3. Okay, d is removed from the execution option of d3. At the same time, d2 is the owner, d2 has the owner option for f2 and f3. So d2 has added a write operation, okay, write copy, and also a write operation for d3, and also it has added a write operation on d3 in f3. Is it clear? So the copy and owner rights allow a process to change the entries in a column. A mechanism is also needed to change the entries. The control right is applicable only to domain object. If access I comma j includes the control right, then the process executing in domain di can remove any access rights from the row j. So for example, as told in the previous figure, we include the control right in access d2 and d4, then the process executing in domain d2 could modify the domain d4 as shown in this figure. Okay. The copy and owner rights provides us with a mechanism to limit the propagation of access rights. However, they do not give us an appropriate tool for preventing the propagation of information. The problem of guaranteeing that no information initially held in an object can migrate outside of its execution environment is called as confinement problem. This problem is a general unsolvable issue. Next we will go on to find out what are the different implementation or how the access matrix can be implemented effectively. So here we will describe some of the methods for implementing the access matrix, and then at last we do the comparison of all the 4 methods. Okay. Now as I told you, here we have got 4 methods. First one is called as a global table. Second one is an access list for object. Third one is capability list for domain, and fourth one is a lock key mechanism. So at the end we do the comparison for all the 4. Okay. Just note down some of the points. The simplest implementation of an access matrix is a global table consisting of a set of ordered triple. Okay, so what it contains is the domain, the object, and the write set. Is it clear? Whenever an operation M is executed on an object OJ within the domain Bi, the global table is searched for a triple Bi, OJ, Rj with the operation M. Does it belong to the write set or does it have the write set Rk? If the triple is found, the operation is allowed to continue. Otherwise, an exception condition is raised. This implementation suffers with several drawbacks. The table is usually large and this cannot be kept in a main memory. So you require an additional I/O is needed. Is it clear? So this is regarding the global table. So keep in mind, global table is nothing but a set of ordered triples, domain, object, and write set. Next, second one, access list for object. What do you mean by access list for object? Here, each column in an access matrix can be implemented as an access list for one object. Obviously, the empty entries can be discarded. The resulting list for each object consists of an ordered pair, a set of domain and write set, which defines all domains with a non-empty set of access rights for that object. This approach can be extended easily to define a list plus a default set of access rights. Now, for example, when an operation M on an object OJ is attempted in domain Bi, we search the access list of object OJ looking for an entry in Di, Rk with M belonging to Rk. If the entry is found, we allow the operation. If it is not, we check the default set. Whether if M is in the default set, we allow it the access. Okay, so this is regarding the access list of object. So access list of object contains domain and write set. The third one is the capability list for domain. So what do you mean by a capability list? Okay, so before moving on to capability list, you need to know few things. Rather than associating the columns of an access matrix with an object as access list, we can associate each row with its domain. That indicates a capability list for a domain is a list of objects together with the operation allowed on this object. An object is often represented by its physical name or address called as capability. To execute an operation M on object OJ, the process executes the operation M specifying the capability for object OJ as a parameter. Simple possession of the capability means the access is allowed. Is it clear? Now, one thing you need to understand is each object has a tag to denote its type either as a capability or an accessible data. The tags themselves must not be directly accessible by the application program. So this is regarding the capability list. So we have got a global table, an access list for object, and the capability list for domain. So the last one is a lock key mechanism. The lock key mechanism is a compromise between the access list and the capability list. Okay, so what happens here is each object has a list of unique bit patterns called as locks. Similarly, each domain has a list of unique bit patterns called as keys. So this is nothing but a combination of lock and key. A process executing in a domain can access an object only if that domain has a key that matches one of the lock of the object. This sounds simple. If you have a key that suits that matches the object, okay, that matches the lock, okay, then we can access it. So as with capability list, the list of keys for a domain must be managed by an operating system on behalf of the domain. Is it clear? Okay, now the last one is comparison. So when we deal with the concept of comparison, we now compare the various techniques for implementing an access matrix. So now we have gone through global table, the access list for objects, capability list for domain, and the lock key mechanism. So when we compare, using global table is simple. However, the table can be quite large and often cannot take the advantage of special grouping of an object or domain. At the same time, the access list corresponds directly to the need of a user. We will move on to the last topic, the revocation of rights. So before moving on to what do you mean by revocation of access rights, we need to understand what do you mean by revocation. Revocation is nothing but deleting an access, or also we can call it as officially cancelling. Okay. So now, in a dynamic protection system, we may sometimes need to revoke access rights to objects shared by different users. So when we go with the concept of revocation, there are many questions about revocation that may arise. First one, whether does the revocation occur immediately or is it delayed? Now, if the revocation is delayed, can we find out when it will be or when it will take place? So this is regarding the first revocation, immediate versus delayed. Second one, selective versus general. When an access right to an object is revoked, does it affect all the users who have an access right to the object, or can we specify a select group of users whose access rights should be revoked? Okay. Next one, partial versus total. Can a subset of the rights associated with an object be revoked, or must we revoke all the access rights for this object? So here we are dealing with the concept of either deleting it or cancelling it. Then the last one is temporary versus permanent. Can access be revoked permanently? That is, the revoked access right will never be again available, or can access be revoked and later be obtained again? So this is regarding the revocation of access rights using the access list. Okay. Now, with an access list scheme, the revocation is easy because the access list is searched for any access rights to be revoked and then they are deleted from the list. So revocation is immediate and can be general or selective, or total or partial, and permanent or temporary. Okay. Now, capabilities, however, present a much more different revocation problem since the capabilities are distributed throughout the system. We must first find them before we can revoke. Okay. Now here we can see some of the schemes that implement revocation for capabilities. First one is reacquisition. What do you mean by reacquisition? So periodically capabilities are deleted from each domain. Now in such case, if a process wants to reuse or use a capability, it may find that the capability has been deleted. So what has to be done? The process may then try to reacquire the capability. Now, during the reacquiring of the capability, if the access has been revoked, then the process will not be able to reacquire the capability. So this is called as reacquisition. Next one is back pointers. A list of pointers is maintained with each object pointing to all capabilities associated with the object. When revocation is required, we can follow this pointer, changing the capabilities as necessary. Okay, so this is regarding back pointers. Next one, indirection. The capabilities point indirectly, not directly to the object. So each capabilities point to a unique entry in a global table, which in turn points to an object. So we implement revocation by searching the global table for a desired entry and deleting it. Then, when the access is attempted, what happens is the capability is found to point to an illegal table entry. This is because we are trying to delete or we are deleting it. The table entries can be reused for other capabilities without difficulty since both the capability and the table entry contain the unique name of the object. The object for capability and its table entry must match. Okay, and the last one is key. A key is a unique bit pattern that can be associated with the capability. This key is defined when the capability is created, and it can be neither modified nor inspected by the process owing the capability. So here we use something called as a master key. The master key is associated with each object. It can be defined or replaced with the set key operation. When a capability is created, the current value of the master key is associated with the capability, and when the capability is excised, its key is compared with the master key. If the key match, the operation is allowed to continue. Otherwise, the exception condition is raised. So revocation replaces the master key with the new value via the set key operation, invalidating all previous capabilities for this. So this scheme does not allow selective revocation, since only one master key is associated with each object. Okay, thank you.